Have you ever watched something that haunted you forever? Something that made you question everything you knew? Tonight, we're diving into the darkest secret behind one of the most beloved childhood shows, Chaves, El Chavo del Ocho. But this isn't the funny, innocent show you remember. This is something darker, something that was never meant to be seen. The lost episode that destroyed thousands of childhoods. Stay until the end of this video because what I'm about to show you will change the way you look at Chaves forever. If you love terrifying stories about TV shows gone wrong, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because you don't want to miss what's coming next. The story begins with a collector. His name was Eduardo Herrera, a man obsessed with rare TV memorabilia. For decades, Eduardo had hunted for everything related to the legendary Mexican sitcom Chaves, El Chavo del Ocho. Signed photos, production, scripts, even costumes, he had it all. But one day, in an online forum dedicated to lost media, he stumbled across a post that would change his life forever. The post was simple, just 2 lines. I have an episode of Chaves that no one has ever seen. It was banned before it aired. DM me if interested. Eduardo's heart raced. He thought it was fake, just another urban legend. But curiosity consumed him. He sent a message. The seller responded within minutes. This isn't for everyone. If you watch it, you'll never be the same. People who have seen it regret. Wit. Eduardo laughed it off at first, thinking it was some ARG marketing trick. But the seller sent a picture, a dusty VHS tape with a handwritten label. Chaves, Episodio Perdido, now asistir, do not watch. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate, like the person who wrote it was terrified. The price? Only $50, too cheap for something this rare. That should have been the first red flag. When the tape arrived, it reeked of mildew, the cardboard sleeve stained with something dark. Maybe mold, or maybe something else. Eduardo held it in his hands, trembling with excitement. He didn't even have a working VHS player, so he bought one from a pawn shop the same day. That night, in his dimly lit apartment, he placed the tape inside the player and pressed play. At first, it seemed normal. The Televisa logo appeared, followed by the cheerful theme song everyone knows. But the audio was distorted, like it was playing underwater. The colors were off, oversaturated reds, blacks so deep they looked like holes. Then the episode started. It didn't have the usual jokes or laughter. Chaves was sitting on the edge of his barrel, staring at the camera, not moving, not blinking, just staring for what felt like 5 full minutes. There was no background sound, no laughter, only a faint buzzing, like an old electrical hum. Eduardo thought it was a glitch. But then Chaves spoke. His voice was wrong, much deeper, almost. Demonique, vocês não deviam estar aqui. You shouldn't be here. The camera slowly panned to show the rest of the patio. But something was off. There were no props, no colors, just empty concrete and shadows stretching unnaturally long. Then the screen cut to black. For a moment, Eduardo thought the tape ended. But suddenly, an image appeared, so fast he almost missed it. A single frame. He paused and rewound. It was Doña Florinda, hanging from a noose in the kitchen. Her face was swollen, her eyes rolled back. His stomach turned. He pressed play again. The episode continued. Professor Girafales entered the patio, but his movements were twitchy, unnatural, like stop motion. He approached Chaves and whispered something in his ear. The audio was warped, but Eduardo swore he heard, "Todos ya estão mortos." They're all already dead. And then, laughter. But not the usual laugh track. This was real, raw, and horrifying. A cacophony of voices screaming and laughing at once, echoing like a nightmare. Eduardo's hands shook. He reached for the remote to stop the tape, but the button didn't work. The VHS player wouldn't eject the tape. The screen flickered violently, as if the TV was resisting his attempts. The last thing he saw before the screen went black again was Chaves walking slowly toward the camera, his head tilting in sharp, unnatural angles, his eyes now 2 black holes. Then, silence. Eduardo sat frozen in his chair. The screen stayed black for a full minute before a message appeared in red text. Você é o próximo. You are next. The power in his apartment went out. When the lights came back on, the tape was gone, but the buzzing didn't stop. Eduardo didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, staring at the empty VHS player, trying to convince himself it was just an elaborate hoax. Maybe a fan-made horror parody. Maybe some early creepypasta video. But deep down, he knew what he saw was real. The next morning, Eduardo returned to the online forum where he found the seller. The account was gone, deleted. Every post associated with it wiped clean, as if it had never existed. He searched the name everywhere. Nothing. The buzzing in his ears still hadn't stopped. It was faint during the day, but loud at night, like a swarm of insects inside his skull. He decided to dig deeper. If this tape existed, there had to be a story behind it. And there was. Eduardo found an old article from 1976, barely archived on a forgotten newspaper website. It mentioned something strange. Televisa delays Chaves episode due to technical issues. That alone wasn't unusual, but then he saw the quote from one of the editors. We will never air this episode. It should never have been filmed. No. Explanation. No follow-up. Just that ominous statement. Eduardo needed answers. He started contacting former Televisa employees through social media. Most ignored him. But after days of trying, one finally replied. The man's name was Rafael Cruz, an editor who had worked on the original show. Eduardo introduced himself as a collector and asked about the episode. The reply came hours later, and it was short. Delete this message. Never speak of it again. Eduardo's heart sank. But before he could reply, another message popped up. If you watched it, it's already too late. His hands shook. He typed back frantically, asking what that meant, but Rafael had already blocked him. That night, Eduardo received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, Project 23, The Forgotten Episode. The email contained a single link to a private video file. Against every instinct, Eduardo clicked it. The video showed a recording of a meeting room, grainy footage from the 70s. Roberto Gomez Bolaños, Chespirito, was there, along with several producers. They were arguing. The audio was hard to hear. But one phrase was clear. Esse episódio não é nosso. This episode is not ours. Another voice shouted, Alguém está colocando coisas nas filmagens. Someone is putting things in the footage. Then the footage cut abruptly to a black screen with white text. Telecast schedule, Episodio 23, Cancelado, Episode 23. Eduardo had never heard of an Episode 23 in that season. But what terrified him the most wasn't the text. It was the faint reflection on the black screen, like a silhouette behind the camera. A thin figure with a distorted head. Suddenly, the video glitched and froze. But the buzzing returned, louder than ever, forcing Eduardo to rip his headphones off. The file disappeared from his computer seconds later, as if it had been remotely deleted. His heart pounded. He started sweating. He knew what he had to do. He needed to find someone else who had seen the tape. So he posted on a private Lost Media Discord group describing what he found. Hours later, he got a DM from someone named La Vecindad no exist. The neighborhood doesn't exist. The message read, I've seen it too. And if you've seen it, they'll come for you. Eduardo typed back, Who? The reply chilled him to the bone. The ones behind the barrel. Eduardo's hands trembled as he reread the message. The ones behind the barrel. It didn't make sense at first. But as the words echoed in his head, a memory hit him. One from the cursed episode. In that distorted, nightmarish version of the Vecindad, there was a barrel in the center of the courtyard. Not Chavez's usual barrel. This one was bigger, darker, and something seemed to move inside it. Eduardo typed back quickly, What are they? The response came almost instantly. Not human, not characters. They exist because someone filmed them. Eduardo's skin crawled. He tried asking more, but before he could hit send, the user went offline. And then the sound started again, that faint buzzing. But this time, it wasn't coming from his headphones. It was coming from inside his apartment. Eduardo froze. The noise grew louder, vibrating the walls, making the glass on his desk tremble. He stood up slowly, scanning the room. Everything looked normal, until he saw it. In the corner of his living room, next to the TV, was a barrel. A wooden barrel, just like the one from Chaves. Eduardo's breath hitched. He didn't own a barrel. He had never seen it before, but it was there, real, solid, and old. Its wood was cracked and wet as if it had been pulled out of a swamp. He backed away, heart racing, and grabbed his phone to take a picture. But when he opened the camera, the barrel didn't appear on the screen. The corner looked empty. He lowered the phone. The barrel was still there. Eduardo felt like he was losing his mind. He stumbled toward the door, ready to leave the apartment, when his TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, then flickered to a grainy image. It was the vecindad, but not the cheerful courtyard everyone remembers. This was dark, abandoned, decaying. The sky above was pitch black, with no sun, no clouds, just emptiness. And then the characters appeared. Chaves, Kiko, Dona Florinda, Seu Madruga. Except they weren't smiling. Their faces were pale, their eyes black voids, and their mouths stretched unnaturally wide. Chaves stepped closer to the camera, tilting his head. His voice came through the speakers, distorted and deep. ¿Por qué nos miras? Why are you watching us? Eduardo screamed and yanked the power cord from the wall. The screen went black. The buzzing stopped. He turned back to the corner. The barrel was gone. Eduardo collapsed to the floor, shaking and gasping for breath. He thought about calling someone, anyone. But who would believe him? His phone buzzed. A new message. It was from the same user. La vecindad no existe. They know you now. You let them in. Eduardo stared at the words, heart pounding. Then another message came. Check the tape. He looked at the VHS player. The tape was still inside. Against every instinct, he pressed play. The episode started. But something was different this time. There was Eduardo in the vecindad, on the screen, standing next to the barrel. Eduardo stared at the screen, frozen in disbelief. His own image moved within the cursed episode, grainy and distorted, but unmistakably him. Same clothes, same room in the background of the shot, now morphed into the eerie courtyard. No. No, 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 he whispered, stumbling backward until his legs hit the edge of the couch. His reflection inside the TV turned slowly, as if aware of Eduardo watching. And then, without warning, it smiled. Not his smile. Something wrong. His reflection's mouth split open unnaturally wide, stretching far beyond human anatomy. Black liquid dripped from its teeth, thick and sticky like oil. Before Eduardo could react, the screen shattered, not into glass shards, but into a swirling, pulsating void of static. The buzzing sound roared, louder than ever. The walls shook, picture frames fell, and the wooden floor cracked as if something massive were pulling him in. Eduardo tried to grab the coffee table for balance, but his hand slid as gravity shifted toward the TV. He clawed at the rug, screaming, but the force was relentless. His body lifted off the ground, dragged toward the vortex of flickering light and sound. "No, no, no!" he yelled as his fingers scraped against the floorboards, leaving bloody trails. With one final deafening pulse of static, Eduardo was sucked into the screen. Darkness. Cold. The smell of damp earth. When Eduardo opened his eyes, he was no longer in his apartment. He was standing in the vecindad, but it wasn't like he remembered. The buildings were collapsing, their walls covered in black moss. The sky above was a swirling abyss of static. There was no sun, just flickering. Lights, like a broken film reel. And then he heard it. Laughter. Not the cheerful laughter from the sitcom. This was guttural, hollow, like something trying to imitate joy but failing miserably. It echoed from behind him. He turned slowly. There they were, Chaves, Kiko, Dona Florinda, Seu Madruga. But their skin was cracked like old porcelain dolls, black, veins crawling under the surface. Their mouths hung open in twisted smiles, dripping that same black liquid. Their eyes were deep pits, empty yet aware. Chaves stepped forward, dragging his wooden hammer across the ground, the sound scraping like nails on a chalkboard. His voice, distorted and layered with static, spoke. "Vas a quedarte con nosotros?" "Will you stay with us?" Eduardo's heart pounded in his chest. He tried to run, but every direction led back to the same courtyard, the same barrel in the center. He sprinted toward the exit arch, but when he crossed it, he was back where he started. Standing by the barrel, he looked down. The barrel wasn't empty. Something inside moved. Slowly, a hand crawled out, thin, pale, and broken like a marionette's. Then another. Then a head, faceless, featureless, but with a wide, bleeding grin carved across where its mouth should be. The laughter grew louder. The characters closed in. Eduardo backed up against the wall, hyperventilating, and then he saw it, his apartment window. It was floating in the air, like a doorway. Through it, Eduardo could see his living room, empty, safe, his escape. He ran toward it, every nerve screaming, as the distorted characters lunged after him. Fingers grazed his shoulders, leaving burning marks. He leaped toward the window and slammed face first into glass. The window wasn't real. It was just a reflection, and in that reflection, Eduardo saw himself again. But this time, he was smiling. Eduardo slammed his fists against the fake glass until his knuckles bled, screaming, sobbing, begging to wake up. But the reflection only mocked him, his double smiling wider, blood dripping like ink from the corners of its mouth. Behind him, the laughter grew deafening. Chaves and the others crept closer, their movements jerky, like frames skipping on a corrupted tape. The courtyard lights flickered violently, and every time they flashed, the characters appeared closer. First by the barrel, then halfway across the courtyard, then just a few steps behind Eduardo. "No, no, please. This isn't real," he whispered. But his voice sounded distorted now, layered with static, like it belonged to someone else. Chaves stopped a few feet away. His empty black eyes seemed to bore into Eduardo's soul. Slowly, he raised the hammer, wood splintered, nails sticking, out like teeth, and rested it on his shoulder. Then, in a voice that rattled Eduardo's bones, he spoke. "Ya eres uno de nosotros." "You are one of us now." Before Eduardo could react, the reflection in the glass reached out from the inside and grabbed him by the throat. Eduardo choked, kicking and clawing, as his own smiling double began pulling him through the cold, slick surface. The static roared like a hurricane. His vision warped, colors bleeding into each other like melted film. And then, silence. Eduardo opened his eyes. He was lying on the ground, his apartment. The TV was off. Morning light streamed through the curtains. For a moment, relief washed over him. It was just a nightmare, a hallucination. He laughed nervously, wiping the blood from his knuckles. Then, he heard it, the laugh track, slow, broken. Like a cassette tape playing underwater, his TV turned on by itself. The Chaves theme began to play, but warped and distorted. The cheerful tune stretched into something nightmarish. Eduardo's stomach twisted as he saw the episode on the screen. There he was, sitting in the barrel, not scared, not crying, smiling, the camera zoomed in on his face, closer and closer until his black hollow eyes filled the screen. The episode ended with a single sentence in white text. "Ahora tú eres el próximo." "Now you are next," Eduardo screamed, lunging for the power cord, yanking it from the wall. But the TV stayed on. He threw it to the ground. It shattered into pieces, but the image remained, floating in the air like a hologram. Eduardo backed away, heart pounding. Then he heard something behind him. Tiny footsteps. He turned slowly, trembling. And there it was. A small wooden barrel sitting in the middle of his living room, its lid trembling as if something inside was trying to get out. Eduardo bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock, but as soon as he opened it, the bright hallway was gone. In its place stood the courtyard, the vecindad. Darker than ever, the static sky swirling overhead. He turned around, desperate. But his apartment was gone. There was no escape. The characters stood in a circle now, grinning wider than humanly possible. Chaves lifted the hammer, pointing it. straight at him. The laugh track played louder, now mixed with distant screams, and then, cut to black, the last frame burned into the screen. Episodio perdido, prohibido transmitir. Lost episode, forbidden to broadcast.